What up, YouTube? Welcome back to 100 Years of Wealth. Kenneth here. Just wanted to drop some more info on you that hopefully can gear you in the right direction regarding building wealth and finances. So, go ahead and like and subscribe real quick though, because y'all be in here gaining all the jewels, but not reciprocating the love, man. Go ahead, go ahead and subscribe. It don't cost you anything. It don't hurt your finger to smash that like button, but it will get you new information every time we upload that hopefully helps you out. So I'm gonna tell you how I made $500,000 on one real estate transaction. Okay, so I'm gonna make it short and sweet for you. In 2016, me and my wife bought a property for $415,000 in an area where at that time we felt that it was undervalued. The reason why we felt it was undervalued was because other properties in the same city with similar square footage or, similar square footage, similar style, similar demographic benefits, right? Have sold for much higher. So my example is this. A lot of people may not agree with what I'm saying, but you gotta agree with the results, right? So if you're from LA, you grew up going to Melrose to hang out, going to Venice Beach to hang out, going to different little cool areas in Santa Monica, right? You've been around South LA, you've been around different little beach communities. And what you probably notice is that all their houses are fairly similar, right? Like in South LA, you have like bungalow style, craftsman style homes. And on Melrose, you have small single family residences. Their lots are probably about 6,000 to 7,000 square feet with bungalow style, craftsman style, maybe 1,500 to 1,600, maybe a little bit bigger, a little smaller single family residences, right? If you're at Melrose, it probably takes you about 30 minutes to get to downtown Los Angeles and maybe 45 minutes to get to the beach, right? And that's without traffic, just based on the geographic location of it. Maybe, without traffic, you can get to downtown LA in maybe like 30 minutes if you're on Melrose, and get to the beach maybe in the same time frame, right? So once again, same style houses as in South LA, geographic location, a little further away from downtown, a little further away from the beach. South LA, I get to downtown LA in the morning about 15 minutes, and that's even with traffic, unless traffic's really thick, maybe 20, 25 minutes, real talk, no lie. Get to the beach, I could hop on Slauson, head down to the 90 freeway, which runs into the 405, and that 90 will take me straight to Marina Del Rey, to Venice, to Santa Monica, usually within like 15, 20 minutes. If it's a Saturday morning, it takes us like 10 minutes, grab some coffee, go over there and chill, check out the sea lions. But my point is that geographically, I think that South LA, Crenshaw, Slauson, View Park, Windsor Hills, those communities, I think they're actually better centrally located, right? So my mind state was like, okay, better centrally located. What's the real difference right now? The real difference is stigma and then also activities, right? Like Melrose definitely has more activities, has like some cool stuff going on, has some restaurants adjacent to Hollywood or just south of Hollywood. You're close to the west side, you're not far from the Beverly Center. So basically cool features. There's cool features about that community that make it very attractive, right? South LA has some cool features too. It has a lot of culture, has a lot of cool restaurants that are, part of the culture, has some unique, cool history created through like hip hop culture, through, just black culture, just different things that community has. But on top of that, it's also geographically more strategic to be there because you're close to everything, right? You're not like, you're close to mass transit, you're close to the beach, you're close to downtown. You can get in and out a little easier in my mind state than, let's say, Melrose, which is a little bit further from the freeways and a little bit more high traffic and a little bit more dense in those areas. So I thought about it like, hey, look, it would be more financially beneficial in the short term and in the long term to buy a property in South LA where there's still things to come up, right? They're still going to be renovating the major mall that's close there, the Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Mall. They're closing down some older grocery stores and preparing to bring in some new stuff. They've added a mass transit that goes from LAX all the way to Exposition Boulevard, which takes people from downtown to Santa Monica. These are all things that are currently happening, new infrastructure coming into the community, less stigma related to past things like gangs and stuff like that. Gangs are obviously a real thing, we get it, but it's definitely changing in regards to, just the relevance of that type of gang activity. You don't really have the same type of, outside visible activity that you did maybe in the 90s. So you start to have people say, okay, things are adjusting a little bit. I'm okay with moving into this area. For one, it's way less expensive than where I was hoping to buy, maybe Santa Monica, West Side, Culver City, all that. And generally speaking, it's better located than a lot of those places, more centrally located, and I can easily get to those places if I want to. And there's still value being gained in those properties. So that's what kind of pushed me towards the direction of saying, hey, look, besides the fact that it's a cool Black community that I've grown up in and around, it's definitely a place where you can buy now and you should be able to see some equity growth in the next coming years. So we bought at $415,000. Right now, that property could sell for somewhere in the range of $950,000 to $1 million if staged appropriately, if a couple of little factors are in play. But I know that to be true based on what other homes have sold in the area for. So even though the cash isn't in our pocket, it's definitely calculated into our net worth, right? When you see people online, it's like, oh, what's this celebrity's net worth, this person's net worth? They are using the factor of they own a property that they bought for $1 million, they owe $700,000 on it, it's now worth $3 million. That $2.3 million difference is considered your net worth. Obviously the market could fluctuate and change, but that is how we come up with calculations of net worth. So from that property alone, that decision to buy in 2016 and still retain that property while values have been going up has produced $500,000 plus in actual equity, actual net worth that we could borrow against if we wanted to, or just sell the property and realize that investment. And because it was actually because it's considered our primary residence, even though we're not living in it and we have tenants there, if, like I explained in a previous video, if you live there for at least 2 years out of the last 5 years, it can still be considered your primary residence for tax purposes, making it to where you can avoid up to $500,000, or up to, you can avoid taxes on up to $500,000 in gained or realized investment, right? That's for 2 people. So it's $250,000 per person, $500,000 for 2 people. So when you're married, you and your spouse get to be, one person each. That's $250,000 per person. You're able to walk away with, if you were to sell, walk away with that $500K tax free, right? Everyone has a plan, or not, I won't say everyone, but we all have grown up like, hey, we want to get to that $1 million mark, we want to be millionaires. You could see in one transaction how you can put yourself in the position to gain $500,000, and it doesn't have to take 5 years, right? It doesn't have to take as long as it took for us. You could buy a property that's maybe a little more beat up in an area that is on the way up. You do some repairs and you push it up to market value, and you're able to see a few $100,000 over a couple of years, right? But there's different ways to do it, but just know that it's out there. And for me, the way that I think that is probably the path of least resistance is owning some sort of asset where the market is steadily headed in the other direction, upward, like Rolexes, Porsches, things like that. Those are kind of in the same boat at the moment, right? But I think that real estate is always going to have a little bit more stability, depending on what area, depending on if it's a high demand global center like Los Angeles, New York, France, or Paris, things like that. I think you're always going to have that global demand that makes it to where even if one area is kind of struggling in their economy, you still have other areas that see that as an interesting place to place money. You know, like I always tell my people that are looking to buy, I'm like, hey, get a Los Angeles address. Don't buy a property, you know, outside of LA, right? And I use the analogy of like, do you want to live in Paris or do you want to live in the small city outside of Paris? Theoretically, it really doesn't matter because it's all about where you're happy at, right? But financially, globally, branding wise, Paris is well branded on earth for the last 500, whatever, however many years. Los Angeles, well branded on earth as one of the top destinations for the last few hundred years. Or not few hundred, sorry, the last 100 years or whatever the case is. New York, globally branded as one of the top cities on earth. These places, having this as your address is going to have an impact on the equity that property gains. So if you can, you know, I think it's beneficial to grab a property with that particular address, right? It's just like if I was buying a watch right now with the idea of like, I want the watch that's gonna gain the most equity and have the most long-term stability, I'd probably buy a Rolex. And the reason is because even though there's watches that are more expensive than Rolexes, the resellability of some of those high-end one-off watches, it's going to be harder because you have a smaller marketplace for, let's say, a Richard Mille watch that's $400,000. You have a way smaller marketplace of people that can afford that, and it doesn't have as long of a longevity or history of being a stable place to put money in. You know, those things can change with trends. You could have some information come out about that company that changes the perspective over the next few years. Just like we've seen Hublot go, you know, for high numbers and then slowly start to trickle back down, or Breitling kind of had the same, you know, experience where values jump through the roof and then they kind of trickle down. Rolex been around for, I don't know exactly how long, but 100 years maybe. And it's consistently trended in the direction of being a stable place to put money, extremely hard to produce, very rare, minimal numbers coming out. So your average person on earth knows Rolex as the place to buy the company that they would want to buy a high-end watch from. It's like comparing like a Porsche to like a Bugatti, right? Like, yes, a Bugatti costs way more, but for your average person, that's not even on your radar as something that they would be able to afford or even really want or desire, right? Now, a Porsche, you're more likely to see most people having that as a realistic desire where they can, you know, when they hit all their numbers, they can spend $100,000, $120,000 on a Porsche, which means that market is always going to be trading units, right? You know what I mean? Like how many Porsches are being sold on a monthly basis compared to Bugattis should tell you the difference on how marketable or how much of a market they actually have. So point being is that the address, the location, it matters. The branding matters. Your city is a brand. So you can either, you know, go outside of the better branded cities, and I'm sure you'll still find, you know, results there because not everyone can afford Los Angeles, and they tend to go outside of Los Angeles. The closer the better, of course. But I think that with more people working from home, there are more people that are okay with going outside of the metropolitan cities and thus creating new hubs of new equity growth outside of that. But my point is that the reason why I think that we saw such an equity gain in such a short amount of time, basically gaining 100% plus of our investment, is because of the location, the city that it's in, the ability to get to the beach, and the ability to get to downtown LA in about 10 minutes either direction you shoot. Consider all those things. You can go out there and make a move that is a lateral move in the sense of your expenses. Like, hey, I'm renting something right now for $3K. Where can I find a mortgage in a property where it's around $3K and I can get in and maybe do some little fixer-uppers myself over the next year or so and see that property go up 100K, 200K, or maybe let's see it go up 50K and build on that, you know? So those are things to consider, but that's how you build, or a way that you can build net worth, because literally if we do sell that property, That's gonna be a $500,000 come up straight to the bank account, Deto. Straight to the bank account, Dero. All right? You know, and then you go on to some other moves. You do some other projects. You do some other things that can create some net worth for you. And over the years, you start to build big chunks of net worth, and hopefully you're reinvesting into other things that can turn that money into more money for yourself and your family. And all we're trying to do, we're not trying to like, you know, have a big diamond necklace unless that's what you're into. We're not trying to like have every single car out there unless that's what you're into. We're trying to build stability, long-term financial health, which limits our physical stress. You know, hopefully that leads to better health overall, happiness, you know, just trying to live out here. Like and subscribe, ask a question in the comments, hit me up. Thank you. Hope all is well. Please like, subscribe, and share with anyone that you know. Have a good day. Cheers to you and yours.